Okay. Good to go. All right. Good afternoon. This is the Public Works Finance and Safety Committee meeting of November 2nd, 2020, called to order, and we'll start with a roll call. Please, Kristen.
Albertson?
Here.
Bueller? Bueller is absent. Hoyer?
Here.
Pauline?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Manti?
Here.
Rademski? Absent. Roby?
Here.
Billhauer?
Here.
Y?
I'm here. Last time you did this in reverse and I was all ready this time.
You don't know what I'm going to do now.
You never know, but I'm present.
Thank you.
All right. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Have a motion by Helene.
Second.
And a second by Hoyer. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, roll call vote, please.
Roll call again.
Yes.
Okay. Albertson?
Aye.
Hoyer?
Aye.
Pauline?
Aye.
Lallam?
Aye.
Manti?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Billhauer?
Aye.
Y?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Next is the public input time, and this is the time for anyone to say whatever they would like. If anyone is here to speak online or in person, please signify by saying permission to speak. Hearing no one, we'll move on to approval of the agenda.
So move.
And before we do that, sorry, I was too slow. I would need to remove item C, which is on the city council agenda. So rather than repeat that, we'll just leave it off here. So is there a motion to approve as amended? Motion by Billhauer, second by Helene. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Albertson?
Aye.
Hoyer?
Aye.
Pauline?
Aye.
Lallam?
Aye.
Manti?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Billhauer?
Aye.
Y?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item A is approval of a professional services agreement amendment for the design and bidding services associated with the 10th Avenue North reconstruction, project number 2007, with Civil Design, Inc. in the amount of $25,700, bringing the revised contract amount to $104,440. Is there a motion? Motion by Helene.
Second.
A second by Billhauer. And I will ask the city engineer, Heath Von Eye, to get this one rolling for us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a change order with Civil Design Incorporated, CDI as they go by. They are our consultant on the 10th Avenue North reconstruction design and bidding services. We entered into a contract with them several months back in order to kick off and start the surveying and design work for 10th Avenue. As we've recently come to making some final decisions on some of the parameters of the design, that's now helped shift us into a direction and get the design finalized. Through those iterations, however, that has increased the cost of our services with the consultant, which they've been trudging forth with even ahead of this change order being finalized. I'll summarize those cost increase here real quickly for the council, for the Public Works Committee's knowledge. One of them includes the street width modifications. Staff had directed the consultant to move forward with a 45-foot street design, which is what they surveyed and initially put together. We feel that was appropriate direction to give them based on the existing street section that's out on 10th Avenue west of the hospital, outside of the boundary of where we'll be reconstructing. However, after commencing with public open house discussions, as we all know, that width became a concern for the residents along this route, And through discussions, we ended up revising that design down to a 38-foot wide street section. So there are costs incurred by the consultant to redesign that 45 width street section to a 38. And then the other major components that this change order also covers are some unforeseen changes in costs that include some storm sewer design. Through the scoping and preliminary design phase, we realized there's some storm sewer issues we need to address on the west end of the project. So some of this money will go towards those efforts. And the other component, let me look here quick. Oh yes, also additional sanitary sewer improvements and the design of those that were also brought up through the scoping and preliminary design phase, where we realized it would behoove the city to extend a couple of our sewer mains and modify and improve some of the sewer service connections to some of these residents before we build back the street surfacing on 10th Avenue. So those components, the redesign from 45 to 38 feet, some additional time for this also includes up to one additional public open house meeting for the consultant to attend if necessary. Some additional landowner meetings for easement negotiations, which we've determined were necessary based on preliminary designs and work limits. And then also the storm sewer and sanitary sewer. I believe the consultant, Jason Peterson, is online here with us from CDI tonight. If you have any specific questions that I can't help answer, I'm sure he'd be glad to.
All right, thank you, Heath. Council, are there any questions or comments? Councilman Vilhar?
Maybe it's maybe it's the date of the letter, but I'm kind of confused. I'm reading this sentence. The following summarizes the additional time that we anticipate will be required to complete the redesign to meet the affected landowners. I mean, that's in effect already been done, correct?
Yeah, so some of the costs that are laid out in here are costs that they've already incurred because they already did that work. You're absolutely
Okay.
right, Councilman Vilhauer.
Okay.
And then there are some additional landowner meetings with those easement negotiations that we will have to have and that we're relying on our consultant to help us
Oh,
with.
so there are some things that will still be happening?
Yes.
Okay.
With limited number of the residents, not all of them, but
Okay.
just those that we need utility or not, excuse me, not utility, but temporary construction easements or things of that nature.
Okay. Thanks, Heath.
Other questions? I'd see none. I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Albertson,
Aye.
Hoyer,
All right.
Colleen,
Aye.
Lallam,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Vilhauer,
Aye.
Y.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item B is approval of the certificate of completion for the development improvements for 26th Street Southeast and a portion of 7th Avenue Southeast located in the Morris Addition, installed by J&J Earthworks, Inc. on behalf of the developer, Coho, and the Morris Family, LLC. Motion by Helene and a second by Hoyer. And I'll ask Heath to tell us about this too.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is one of our active subdivisions that recently completed the installation of public improvements per their development agreements that were executed some time back. This relates to 26th Street, north of Travs, along Highway 212 there. I'll pull up a map and share my screen here for reference. So the area in red is essentially what's being issued a certificate of completion. And if the Public Works Committee would recall, this is the first step in the project closeout. What this does is initiates the one-year warranty on these public improvements that were installed in this area. The public improvements for this particular project in this particular area include, of course, the street, curb and gutter, and then also some storm sewer improvements and some sanitary and sewer improvements, all of which have been inspected by engineering or public works staff to be complete. And upon approval, we will start the clock for the one-year warranty period and be back in 1 year for a resolution of acceptance.
All right, any questions, council? Thank you, Heath. No questions. All right. Oh, someone does? Oh, Adam. Go ahead, Councilman Lallam.
Thank you. Hey Heath, if that does not pass the 1-year warranty, and can you give us just some examples of what would not cause that to make it through that first year? And then what is the, what would happen if it doesn't pass that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question to point out at this phase in the process, Councilman Lallam. So in 1 year or prior to 1 year, about the 10th, 11th month, we put these projects on our calendar and the staff get a reminder to go out and do a warranty inspection. What they look for is any kind of trench settlement in the roadway from utility installations. They look for any cracked curb and gutter, any faulting in any of the concrete work that may have occurred. They look at the ADA ramps or sidewalk ramps that may be part of the project. Make sure that all the appurtenances to the water and wastewater system, like the valves and manholes, haven't had any differential settlement with the road and cause issues with the plows. Really a whole realm of things that we look at just to make sure that the street is still in good condition and all the other public improvements are in good operable condition. We do have some latitude in that inspection that, you know, there's a difference between a hairline crack in concrete versus a crack that's gapped and faulted. You know, so we don't get too nitpicky, I'll say, but we do look at it holistically and practically as far as public improvements are concerned and make sure that we don't see any premature failures of any of those components. Now, if any of those components were to fail, we still bring forth the resolution of acceptance for everything that passes, and the developer is required to repair what failed, and then according to our current ordinance, they're then required to give us an additional 1-year warranty on those warranty corrected items. And that's how we would proceed with from there.
Thanks, Heath.
All right, were the sidewalk corners of the ramps part of the development agreement?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mayor. I'd have to defer to Marcy. Marcy Luner's our project manager on this, that our engineer one in the engineering office. Marcy, are you online here?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yes. I actually did not get a chance to check that development agreement for the lamps. I can do that and get back to you, though.
Okay, so normally would go in with the curb and gutter if they're going in before development, and the curbing in the 2020 aerial photo, the curb and gutter's in but no ramps. So, and they probably don't have any sidewalk in. That's another time that you would do it, is when the sidewalk goes in, but the ramps are the most expensive part of the sidewalk, and normally we would expect the developer to pick that up and not defer the sidewalks, not to defer it with the sidewalks.
They have deferred it with the sidewalks on this one. The sidewalk is not in.
Okay. And that is a development agreement requiring it?
I am going to check that.
Okay.
I'll have to follow back up with that.
Okay.
I did see on the plans, and I asked at the time that we were going through it why the sidewalk was not put in, and they said, oh, that shouldn't be there, we'll have to take that off, and then didn't give me any further explanation on it.
Shouldn't be where?
Shouldn't have been on the plans. They just showed the outline of where the sidewalk was going to be.
Okay. Yes.
So question for Heath or anyone. If the sidewalk is not here, are we just going to come back to this sometime in the future and have another sidewalk issue like we've been facing recently at council meetings?
Yeah, so to the mayor's point, to your point, Councilman Helene, if the development agreement allows the developer to pass the sidewalk responsibility on to the lot purchasers and the builders, which is a common reality that we see in a lot of our subdivisions, as far as residential subdivisions are concerned.
Right. It's not deferred in the development agreement. I just pulled it up. Developer shall install or cause to be installed sidewalks in all public rights of way adjacent to all lots, and developer shall install all pedestrian ramps at street intersections with the curb and gutter improvements. Ramps must comply with current ADA standards, including the provisions for detectable warning. And they had until, what's the date that they had until to build those? The engineer has certified all the required improvements are done, and they're not. 3 years from the date of recording, and the incident was recorded April of 2017, so it's beyond time for them to do that.
April of 20. Well, I do apologize not having this on the list. If it is part of that development agreement, that's something that Marcy and I and Justin just spoke about here in the last couple of weeks. As we've been transforming into these processes and making sure these developments are closed out properly, that was one point that we just talked about, not just having the construction plans out in the field for inspection, but also the development agreement. Because for some reason or another, sometimes they don't match uniformly between the two documents. So we apologize that we did not have that for this particular walkthrough. We can certainly postpone this certificate of completion if we wish, and circle back to the developer and require those sidewalk installations be complete.
Councilman Holeen?
Thank you, Mayor. I would be very interested in pursuing that course of action, because I think a lot of us up on the council, I think almost all of us, don't want to push problems down to future meetings or future councils, and it seems to me that that is what we might be doing if we don't address this right now.
I would agree with that too. I don't want to take an action on this and have that one item hanging out there and have to deal with it later. So I don't know if that means we just defer the whole thing then, or reject this or whatever. That'd be my thought as well.
All right. Anyone else?
And staff would be completely in agreement with that direction if that's what the committee chose to move forward with.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has input? If not, I'll look for action, and this action, if approved, would accept the improvements as complete. So vote accordingly. No, it's a positive, I mean, you can reject the positive motion if you don't want to pass it. Is someone trying to speak? Oh, Matt Roby, the attorney?
I think I heard somebody say it in there, but I would suggest perhaps a postponement action rather than a rejection, but it's up to the council, of course.
At this time of year, they may not get sidewalks in. Councilman Hoyer?
Well, I was going to ask, is the way that's written right now, would we then need to take that back and amend it anyway? I mean, just for the function of it, does it make more sense just to shoot it down and then have it come back when it's correct?
Yeah, I think so. Be suitable. Councilman Lallam?
Matt, could we move to table this until the next meeting? Would that be the best course of action for that?
It won't be in yet, Adam. The sidewalks.
No, I know, but to get some, to get a understanding from the developers on that.
Yeah, so the correct action would be either to postpone it to a date certain, if there was any sort of idea that we'd have a date certain, or to just reject it.
Councilman Hoyer?
I just feel like no matter what, if we postpone it, we're playing a guessing game of when these would go in. I think it just makes more sense to just outright say nay to it for now, and then it's not saying we won't ever accept it, just we got to make some corrections and then it'll come back. Postponing just seems like a guess, and we're just going to see it again.
I would agree with that.
All right. Any other comments before we take action? All right, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Albertson,
Nay.
Hoyer,
Nay.
Moline,
No.
Lallam,
No.
Manti,
No.
Roby,
Nay.
Bill Howard,
Nay.
Wide,
Nay.
motion fails.
All right, thank you. Item C was deferred to the council meeting, and item D is the Upper Big Sioux River Watershed Project update and presentation. And I'll ask Heath to briefly introduce this, and then Roger Foote is online to give the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just for some context here, Roger Foote, our Upper Big Sioux Watershed Project Manager, gave a very good presentation to the Watertown Municipal Utilities here a few weeks back. One of the efforts or reasons why sharing that information with WMU is that they are one of our many sources of funding for the Upper Big Sioux Watershed Project. And Roger was updating them on projects and where their money goes and the efforts that their money helps us accomplish. So Roger did such a great job, we thought we'd invite him to the Public Works Committee and present here as well. So without any further ado, Roger, if you could take it over and give the presentation.
Thank you, Heath. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
There seems to be a little bit of electronic static on the lines, but the first thing I would like to do is kind of give you guys an overview of the Upper Big Sioux watershed area. I've shared one of my screens, and you should be seeing a Google Earth map. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right, the heavy yellow boundary encompasses all that area that drains down through Watertown and into Lakes Compesca and Pelican. That designates 245,000 acres that what I call my playpen, so to speak. The funding to do this plan comes from the EPA through the state. And of course, the city is a major sponsor with the utilities as a major sponsor, and the Lake Compesca Water Project District. And recently becoming more and more active is the Lake Pelican Water Project District as well. So this is the area that we try to do clean water practices. Anything that we can think of to slow the water down, to drop out sediments, to use up nutrients within the watershed boundary area, anything that we can come up with and that we can cost share producers into voluntarily participating into doing these programs. One thing with the utility department, I want to zoom in here on where our drinking water comes from. This is right next to Rawville. If anybody's ever had a hamburger at the Rawville station, go just a little bit further north and off to the west there. This is where the new well field was constructed. I think the deepest well there is about 36 feet, and they can produce, I don't know the exact number, but I think in the neighborhood of 7 million gallons a day of water for the city of Watertown. I think that's around their maximum capacity, not 100% sure, but that's a lot of water that comes out of a puddle that's only 36 feet deep. Of course, the sands and gravels of the watershed area, everything flows down through the system. We are based in a shallow aquifer system, and it's very interchangeable between the river and the aquifer. You know, when we have heavy surface water, the aquifer soaks up the excess. When the aquifer is full, it discharges to the surface and drains away. I want to switch screens here. If I can make this work. And go to this one. This is kind of what we're looking at for 19 and 20. Have not been good years for us, and I don't think they've been good years for anybody else as well. We've been dealing with flood issues, construction nearly impossible in farm fields. Producers, they're just not interested until the markets stabilize, and the fields are just muddy. So we've been pretty much focusing on water damage and mitigation efforts over the last couple years. But there again, this is why our segments are in 3-year periods. You never get, or seldom get, 2 years in a row where it's adequate for construction in the fields and the things that we want to do. So the last couple of years, we have not accomplished much dollar-wise, but we have been coming up with, the proposed projects are starting to stack up. Proposed projects for 2021, as you can see, the cost share, those funds come from the EPA and the city and the utilities. The owner share, every owner has to kick in at least 25% of each project. And then of course there's a total cost. So if everything goes according to plan, which we are desperately hoping that they will, we will be able to spend upwards of $300,000 next year in all of these projects that we have lined up. Granted, things don't always go as planned. It may take a little longer to do this, but these are the projects in the watershed area that we are shooting for. Let's see, to give a little more perspective, these are all the sediment traps that we have done in the past. I think this was 2018. Sediment traps are basically dugouts, holes in the ground that as the water passes over, sedimentation drops out. Can be up to 2,000 yards each over a 10-year period of nutrient-laden sediments that does not make it down the watershed system into the lakes. There's a lot of maintenance after a flood year to these specific dugouts. They do tend to fill up quickly in a flood year like last year was, and they'll hopefully need to be cleaned out again to catch all that sediment. What else have we got here? I'll get back to that in a second. Some of the proposed projects, we're going to switch back over to the map. I want to show you where they are. And I want to start out with a small dam complex that's on the books. Currently in the design phase, we've hired an engineer to take a look at this. We want to try and add in a couple, two, possibly three small dams to slow the water down as it passes through, and then repair the existing, right around the outside edge of this is a berm that holds the water back. They've kind of taken it from a dugout to a small dam to a water source there. It's in desperate need of repair, but in the process, if we can slow some additional water down before it gets to there, more sediment drops out, takes the pressure off the drainage system downstream. That one is in engineering. With any luck, it will look similar to the Almdal site that we did a few years ago. This is a farm site. We improved or took out an old bridge that could not be used for farm machinery any longer. Put in a small dam with it holds a small pool, lets the majority of the waters flow through. Down through the system. There's a calving lot here. There's feeding lots up here, even an ag waste system further up. Anything that escapes those systems comes down through here, and there's these little check dams that help slow the water down, enhances the wetlands upstream of them. The nutrients slow down in those locations and is utilized, and anything that makes it past there comes further down the system into this small dam area where we have a permanent pool, and yet it allows floodwaters to pass through, which also reduces the nutrient load to the Big Sioux River right over here. So anything that we can do up in the watershed area to help reduce those nutrients is definitely a plus. Proposed small dams. Yeah, we'll move along. Here's another great location. There is a feeding operation upstream of it. This one's just to hold a small pool with an emergency spillway to let the big waters go, but catch those rainstorms as they happen throughout the summer. Another proposal closer to the Big Sioux River. We're looking at this one for feasibility. We're not 100% sure this one will work, but we need to do the engineering on it to make sure that it does before we commit to it. Another tentative site. This one, there's some pretty decent relief in this area. The landowner is looking for a pool of water to run an irrigation system out of. I think we can get that there. That one also has been in engineering, and we're waiting for landowner to say go ahead with it. Let's see. Another project we're looking at is a clean water diversion. If you guys are familiar with feedlots at all, you can tell by the brown colors that this one is a mess. Springtime, it's just total soup all the way through. So we're looking at this to try to find a way to divert the clean water around the site and to do some leachate collection in the system. I'm not sure exactly where this one is going to go, but we've kind of just started the discovery design process to see what the producers are willing to accept and what the potential cost would be to actually do a full-blown ag waste system or just clean water diversion. So this one's pretty interesting. They've got, I would say they winter a few hundred animals in this site, and that all just runs right off and through. In the CRP realm, or the Conservation Reserve Program through the NRCS, there are certain situations within the watershed that the producer isn't going to run animals on it any longer, but they want some sort of return on their investment. So they have rental programs and incentive programs to, like this, I think this is 38 acres that will no longer be used for animal production. But if we rent that from the producer for the next 10 years or so, that gives them some sort of small return on their investment, and yet it keeps the cattle and the pollutants out of the system. There's a 38 acre. This is a 10 acre one that we just did. This takes some acreage out of row crop production, which basically becomes a buffer and a filter for that field. It's the same one. Riparian area management, looking at a couple of potentials. Nothing's in stone here, but this one's closer to town. We're looking at renting these acres right along the Big Sioux River. And I will note that the piece right above it is already in the program, so there will not be any animals in there as well. And another potential I'm working on, waiting for contracts to be signed. This one turns out to be like 80 acres, a combination of renting the pasture with the river in it or a portion thereof, and then CRP incentives with the NRCS for the surrounding area to really create an awesome buffer system for the river. Grass waterways are also a big thing that we do, and it's basically field erosion, reconstructing field erosion directly by putting in up to a 30-foot wide strip of grass through those channels. The guy lost his combine in there last year. We're going to smooth it out this year, plant grass, have an easement on it so that he can't plow it back up again. And that functions as a filter for the row crops and the highly erodible soils. Another one we're trying to do, weather permitting, is reconstructing this waterway to take care of those, the gullies and the ruts, smoothing it out so that he can get his machinery through, putting in a parabolic shape to it, and again, using it as filtration for the farm field. What we got here? That's the same one. Not all projects go through. Just to briefly touch on this one, this was an 80-acre parcel that was a proposed wetland bank. As we were jumping through all the hoops and trying to get the Corps of Engineers involved and online with it, It did fall through. The Corps said that this was not appropriate for this site. We were going to enhance the wetlands, construct more wetlands, and use it as a mitigation bank. The theory behind that was to take these small acreages that otherwise would get intensive animal agriculture or row crops on them and make it worth the while of the landowner to actually get a return on their investment for these small parcels through a wetland bank. If they can sell credits, that makes it not just wasteland anymore, and then they'll value those wetlands more. Well, that's the theory. This one fell through. It's really sad. We spent 2 years and well over 50,000 in engineering fees just to get to this point, and then the Corps shot us down at the last moment.
Roger, what was their reason for rejecting it?
Not appropriate. It would heal itself if we leave it alone. And they would give us maybe 1 credit when our initial calculations were 45 credits. That's if you would like to ask questions later offline, I can give you the name of the Corps of Engineers guy that has pretty much taken over the program and is making life difficult for not only us, but everybody in the system. So those are the proposed projects that we have for next year. Some of the good, some of the bad, some of the ugly. I think, let me switch back one more time. Is this the right one? Yep. And I want to hit this one again as well. Not only do we work with producers within the watershed area, and you know that I forgot to mention the 2,000 feet of shoreline that we helped repair just this year, and then we've got about that much more to go. But we interact with our clean water message with over 7,000 people annually through education events, second graders, sixth graders, Camp Chance, the service clubs. You know, I do the talk show circuit in town here every once in a while, go talk to everybody. Homeschool macroinvertebrate demonstrations. If you want a fun time, let me come talk to you about bugs. It's really a blast. In closing, you know, the city of Watertown has been our main sponsor since the beginning of this, and I can't stress enough how much I appreciate the people of Watertown being able to support us as strongly as they do. I don't think, seldom have I ever been told no for anything that I've ever asked for, and I really appreciate that. With that, Heath, I'll give it back to you.
Thanks, Roger.
And I have nothing further to add to that, Mayor, other than I think it's great to share this information to give people an idea what it is Roger works on and focuses on, the breadth of projects that we're trying to accomplish, all for the sake of the water quality in the Upper Big Sioux watershed region. So,
very good, thanks. Anybody have any questions for Roger? Councilman Villar?
Yes, first of all, thanks for the presentation, Roger. The second time I've sat through it now, and very informative each time, so thank you for that. I do have a question for you, though. Obviously, the producers that you work with, the projects you've lined up, those are the ones that want to do things right. Who, if anybody, monitors what goes on out there in the watershed when there is just blatant, you know, pollution, runoff, et cetera? Who gets involved in that, if anybody?
Oh, that's a tough one, Glenn. The state has limited control. If a producer is blatantly disregarding the rules and doing things on purpose that he should not be, the state will get involved to a certain point. But let's face it, the enforcement division is pretty toothless. If a producer refuses to let them on site, they will walk away. The neighbors are the greatest eyes and ears out there. I get many phone calls throughout the year saying, hey, so-and-so is doing this. It may be just, hey, you know, I'll give them a call and say, hey, I can help you do this better if you want to. And that usually solves a lot of the problems.
Okay. So you don't take an active role in any monitoring unless somebody brings it to your attention, then you will throw out suggestions, or will you refer it on to a state level, or do you get involved in that at all?
Yes, and the projects that we do cost share, I do have some teeth involved with that. If after 5 years on a 20-year contract, the thing is destroyed or something happens to it or disregarded, I do have the ability to go back and request a prorated amount of our money back. But as far as enforcement, no. But I can and I have and I will pass things along to the state level if there's a major problem or if there's something that they'll actually do to help correct it.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Roger.
Councilman Albertson?
Thanks, Mayor. Roger, I have a question. In a
Sure.
dry year, you've mentioned a lot of CRP areas there, but when it's dry, would that be land that would typically be turned over then to the farmers, let's say, and they could go in and cut the acres, cut the whatever's on it, and or graze it if it is really dry, or what's the no on that?
It depends greatly on which part of the program they're involved with. If it's a CRP, the NRCS rules trump anything else, and sometimes they will open that up to grazing and haying. If it's like a seasonal riparian area management program that we can administer, then there are conditions where they can go in and take the hay, as long as they leave 6 to 8 inches of stubble, but no animals between June and September, and any haying that occurs has to be after the 15th of July. So there's rules that they have to abide by, but they can use it if there's an emergency or if the right year comes along.
Right, any other questions or comments? Don't see any. Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business? New business. Is there any new business? Councilman Albertson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just have a question, and maybe you're going to cover it someplace along the line, but I'm thinking about safety in terms of masks and what's happening with our new program. I haven't seen anything, and I just continue to have people say that the city isn't doing anything about this COVID issue. So hopefully, maybe you're going to say something about it later, and if so, I'll just back out, but I don't want it to not go talked about tonight.
Okay, we did launch our social media campaign, and I don't know if it was the word mask or if all types of promotions were stunted by Facebook and Instagram, but I know that our Instagram was not promoted by, it wasn't allowed because of political. It was seen as being a political, and it said all political posts are being shut down until after the election. And so I sent that on to the person, the public information officer that was heading up the social media posts, and I haven't heard back on what's happening with that. But I do believe that you're not seeing it on social media because Facebook and Instagram are not allowing political posts to be shared, and that's seen as political. But the city is promoting. I mean, I joined together with 15 other mayors to promote it, and the philosophy is that we aren't talking about mask mandates. That's kind of almost insubordination when you have your governor and your president saying they are against that for the communities to support it. However, we don't feel we need a mandate in order to promote mask usage, and that's why the mayors wrote the letter to all of the people asking to please cooperate. We we know that masks are not perfect. They don't stop the disease. There's no question about that. Wearing a mask does not prevent you from getting it, nor does it prevent you from spreading it. However, it does limit the exposure, both to you and from you. And we feel that there's enough evidence that that results in a reduction in the spread of the disease. And so it's what we've got. It's our tool. And so we're asking people to do that, but not just that. We're asking people to maintain social distance, good hand hygiene, stay home if they're sick, avoid mass gatherings, and together, using all of those items, we can hopefully reduce the number of people that come down with COVID enough so that our hospitals are not incapacitated or overwhelmed. And that's our main goal. Christine just sent me, thank you, Christine, a performance measure of our Facebook posts that we've reached 22,371 people with the social media posts, and we've had 1,671 reactions, either comments or shares. And so that's actually really good. It's probably the local stuff that we're able to do. It's just not the other part of it. So feeling pretty good about that. The Casey DeBoer, the CEO of the hospital, did make a comment last Wednesday that we were having 1 death a day at the hospital. And today he said that trend has continued. And so that's pretty harsh. 1 death every day in our hospital. In the hospital today, Monday, November 2nd, we have 15 very sick COVID patients. And so we need to change our behavior if we want to change the trends. And I've got some photos of the Instagram. Okay, so this is I've got a copy of our Facebook post, which shows 6 different photos of people wearing masks, and 22,371 people reached. So we're getting some coverage, just maybe not as we're expected, but maybe that will change after the election's over. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Councilman Vilhauer?
I've got a question for Heath. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you gave a good presentation at a planning commission meeting here a couple of meetings ago about the current status of workforce and staffing needs in building services, engineering, et cetera. You want to give us a brief overview where we do stand as far as positions that we are looking at needing to fill in the near future?
Yes, thank you for that, Councilman Vilhauer. The current openings that we have in community development, there are 2 in community development and 2 in the engineering divisions of Public Works, both of which those divisions, of course, are housed here on the 2nd floor of City Hall and carry out a lot of the permitting, building permitting, development, and inspection processes for the city. The one key position that is still vacant in community development is the building specialist. I apologize, we do have 1 vacancy there right now. We did just fill the 2nd one, and we have recently hired a permit technician. The permit technician is hired on to handle some administrative duties along with some minor permitting. And then the vacant building specialist that we're still seeking will do a kind of more of a robust, more in-depth code review of the larger permits that we issue throughout the community. So that one is still vacant. And then on the engineering side, we have an EIT, engineer in training position that's posted right now for a degreed civil engineer. And that is what we discussed adding into the 21 budget. And as suggested, which I think was a great idea, we went ahead and got it advertised right away, and as of now, have not received any applications for it. So we do suspect that'll remain a challenge to fill just because of the high demand for engineers and engineering technicians. The other vacancy we have right now on the engineering side is a licensed surveyor, and that too is another difficult position to fill, and we haven't had much success here in the recent past to obtain applications for that either. But we are continuing to work with HR. They've got posts out in several places, and Jelane's been working hard on our behalf to help get these filled, so we appreciate that.
Thank you. Is there any other new business? Okay, we will be going into executive session, but first I asked the city attorney, Matt Roby, to give a reminder about the rules around executive session, just for both the staff and for any of the public watching. So, Matt, would you please go ahead with that?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Mayor. Just want to touch on a couple of items here, just as a refresher for the purposes for which we can go into executive session and some of the procedures that need to be followed pursuant to state law. The reasons, the authorized reasons for executive sessions that relate to us are as follows. The city can go into executive session to discuss personnel matters and labor relation matters, contract negotiation with unions, that sort of thing. It can go into executive session to consult with legal counsel on pending or proposed litigation or contractual matters. It can go into executive session to consult with our economic development arm, the Watertown Development Company, or other individuals who may be assisting with economic development issues to discuss confidential financial information related to those projects. And fourth, the most recently added exception to the open meetings rule for executive session are security related issues. It was just added last year after last year's legislative session, and that's pretty broad. It encompasses quite a few areas. For example, emergency response, security audits, sensitive public safety information, computer network related information, that sort of thing. So those would be authorized reasons to go into executive session. Now, to go into executive session, as you notice, is done when we do so. A motion needs to be made. There needs to be a citation to the statute with a specific reference to what's going to be discussed, to the broad category about what's going to be discussed. Of course, not the specifics of the discussion. So there needs to be the citation and the mention of the category for which we're going into executive session. Discussions in executive session need to be limited to that topic. They can't veer to another topic. Even another topic that would be an allowed executive session item cannot be discussed if it wasn't mentioned in the motion. There needs to be a majority vote to approve that to go into executive session. Then a couple of other items here. Of course, no action can be taken in executive session, so technically you can't make a motion to go out of executive session. The chair of the meeting can just declare the group out of executive session once the discussion has concluded. The one other note here, let's see, if action is taken in executive session illegally, you'll note that the members of the council that are participants in that action can be held personally liable for the result of any sort of action that might have been taken in executive session that was illegal. They can also be held criminally liable. Violations of open meetings law are a class 2 misdemeanor. And finally, of course, the executive sessions by their very nature are confidential, and any participants in the executive session have a duty of confidentiality as it relates to the information that was discussed.
All right, thank you, Matt. I think it's good to have a refresher every now and then. And with that, we will have an executive session this evening in order to discuss and consult with legal counsel on contractual matters as well as confidential financial information for economic development purposes. And so I'll look for a motion to go in.
So moved.
In pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2. And we do not expect to take any action upon coming out. So I had a motion from Hoyer. Was it?
It's myself or Glenn. Your pick.
Okay. And a second by Vilhauer. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Albertson,
He may have stepped away.
okay. Hoyer,
Aye.
Pauline,
Aye.
Lallam,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Vilhauer,
Aye.
Y.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. We are in executive session.